Okay, here's a sample hand history of how I might go through a hand while I'm by myself or with friends who are good at reviewing hand histories. First of all, note that I have Jack 4 offsuit, and I'm probably not going to play this hand. I did pick this out of a couple hands because it's somewhat interesting. But I think it's important to make sure that you go through all of your hands and not simply skip past hands that you may just realize you'll fold pre-flop. So in this hand, YYR opens under the gun. He's got a fairly tight range, so that's something to note. He's probably opening something like, it says 12%. I would suspect maybe even less, considering being specifically under the gun and his stack size. We got under the gun +2 call by another very tight player who doesn't call very often, so I assume his range is fairly strong as well. And the big blind decides to come along. He could and probably does have a fairly wide range. Stats indicate he can call pretty frequently, and he probably should be calling frequently. So immediately on the flop, all three players check. And the first thing that comes to my mind is this player, his name is, well, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, but the player in position should have bet. I feel pretty comfortable with that because YYR, he probably has nothing. If you're a pre-flop raiser and the board is Jack 9-3 rainbow, you're not going to be checking through too many hands. So, it's possible he has something like Jack 9 or Jack Jack, but there's not very many made hands that he could possibly have. So his range is most certainly hands that just don't like this board. And the guy in the big blind, like we said, can have a very wide range. So, checking doesn't really tell us much about his range, but it's basically a heads-up pot for this player in position. And we've already determined that he has a fairly strong range. So, it's not certain that either of these guys is sinking this deep into the hand, but this flop could certainly be very good for our player in position. He doesn't even need to bet very much. I think about a 3,000 is sufficient to get the big blind to fold if he doesn't have anything, and YYR is almost certainly going to fold on the flop. The turn is a 7. The pot goes bet 2,000 and raise. So now this is extremely interesting. Our read was on the flop that the under the gun raiser either potentially had extremely strong hand like Jack 9 or Jack Jack, or that he had nothing. So either this 7 of hearts somehow made his range of nothing into something, or he was checking the flop with a very strong hand. And so the only hands that I can think of that this 7 of hearts really would really help the under the gun player is if he had something like potentially ace 10 of hearts. It's possible he has something like 9-7, but I don't even think that's in his pre-flop range. So like 2 big hearts, maybe 7-7. Those are really the only hands that are in his range that card improves. But I also don't think he's ever bluffing at this bet size. So really his range right now, the bottom of his range is 2 big cards and 2 hearts. And a lot of his range is made hands like sets, 2 pairs. I don't even know if he has ace jack as a possibility in his range. So knowing that, if I'm either of the other 2 opponent players in the hand, I think that they're going to have to fold most of the time. And they should fold most of the time. But the big blind decides to come along for almost 4,000 chips. In my eyes, the only things that the big blind can really call with are if in his mind he has a very big made hand as well, or potentially some sort of draw. Maybe he has two hearts. Maybe he has the hearts. Maybe he has something like Queen 10. It's also, the real possibility is that the guy in the big blind is just a bad player and has something like Queen Jack. So it's always important to know, what he should possibly have, but also what he might actually have. The river is Queen of Diamonds. Doesn't change too much. If anyone had King 10, maybe King 10 of Hearts, just got there in a big way. No other straight made it, no flush made it. I guess Queen Jack made it if the big blind did have Queen Jack. But YYR should have the best hand here most of the time, and considering the stack to pot ratio, I don't expect he will ever fold. Wow. And the big blind leading like this, again, there's not very many hands that made it all of a sudden. Queen Jack, maybe Queen 9 if he, Queen Jack or Queen 9 if, or hands that he could have but shouldn't. 10-8 is a possibility. Like we said, King 10 is also a possibility. And while I'm not giving him any bluffs, I don't really think it's prudent to give him any bluffs, because it doesn't make sense for him to have any bluffs with this line. It's possible he has two hearts, but I think considering what happened on the turn, he's much more likely to simply just give up. So this bet is definitely going to be super heavy weighted into a hand where that queen helped. And I don't expect YYR to ever fold. Well, and there you have it. Now, I did review this hand before I recorded it, but that's exactly my analysis before I did the recording. I really thought that SRM had something like Queen Jack, but we also gave him possibilities of having straights, and it seemed pretty obvious that the queen helped his hand. So there you have it. There is an in-depth discussion done by myself of a singular hand. And we still believe that if this guy down here, Tervaja, would have simply bet the flop, he probably would have won the hand. And yet his mistake led to this really big pot brewing. I hope this gives you a little bit of an idea of how you might break down a hand on your own. And I realize it can be quite a long process, but if you're reviewing hands on your own, one of the most important things is knowing how other people are playing, because you already know how you play. So if you're reviewing hands, part of the benefit is being able to go deep into a hand, spend a lot of time with the hand, and further develop your understanding of what players' ranges should be and what they might actually be.